Hi everyone, and welcome back to this week's Whittlesey and surrounding areas property news update. So before we get to this week's numbers, there's one date I want you to have in your diary, and some of you will remember that I mentioned it last Friday too. So next Thursday, the 18th, the Bank of England decides what's happening with interest rates. They've held it at 3.75% since the end of last year, and most people believe they'll leave it where it is again. So I'm not expecting any big shocks, but it's the one everybody with a mortgage keeps half an eye on. So I'll let you know next week how it goes. So here's what's actually going on underneath all that. So a few of the big lenders, so your NatWest, your Barclays, your Santander, they've been bringing their fixed rates down a little over the last few weeks. So if you're coming up to remortgage or you're looking to buy, that's good news. But it's not all one way. There's a lot going on in the world at the minute, and that's nudged one or two rates back up again, even though the base rate itself hasn't moved. So honestly, my advice is the same as it always is. If you find a deal that works for you, take it. Don't sit and wait for something better to come along, because these rates are moving every week. And on house prices nationally, it's all pretty calm. So more or less flat, up a tiny bit over the year, barely moved over the month. The one thing that has changed is there's a lot more on the market now than there has been in a long time for this time of year. And for a buyer, that's no bad thing at all. More to choose from, and you can see that locally too, which is exactly where we're going next. So that's the big picture, but let's look at what's been happening right here on your doorstep. So what we then look at is the new properties that have been instructed this week. So the ones that have come on across all agents in PE7 1 and PE7 2. So how many new homes came up for sale this week across Whittlesey and the surrounding areas? Well, there were 10, plus a couple of plots of land on top of that. And that's about where we were last week as well, around a dozen. So it's ticking along nicely, not drying up, not going mad, just steady. And it's a good mix this week, which I always like to see. So there were 4 detached houses. So within that there was a 3-bedroom at 290,000, a 4-bed at 350,000, and a 6-bed over in East Street at 475,000, and another 4-bed at 500,000. Then talking about the semi-detaches, there were 3. So there was a 3-bed at 250,000, another at 290, and a 4-bed at 340,000. And I think that 340,000 was a reduction, which is quite hard to pull out in these updates. Then there were 2 bungalows, a 2-bedroom at 240,000 and a 3-bed at 325, and 1 flat, a 2-bedroom at 200,000. And that one's your cheapest that came onto the market this week. Quite steep for a flat, but go and take a look. So what does that tell you? Most of what came up sits between 240,000 and 350,000. That's your proper family home, and then a couple of bigger ones above that if you're looking to move up. So if you're a buyer and you've been waiting for a bit more choice in that middle range, this week is a good week for you. And if you're thinking of selling around that price, just know you've got a bit more competition out there at the minute. So getting yours looking right and priced right is what makes the difference. And the sales this week show exactly that, which is where we're going next. So let's look at the sales that have been agreed this week, and again across all agents, PE7 1, PE7 2. And that's the bit that everyone waits for, what's actually sold. And this week is a real turnaround from last week. So last Friday we only had 4 to tell you about, and they were all either right at the bottom or right at the top, nothing in the middle. This week there were 12, and this time it's the middle of the market doing all the work. So let me run through them. So nothing was under the £100,000 mark this week. Then if we look at the 100,000 to the 150,000, there was actually 1. So that was a 3-bed at 108,000. So a really good first step on the ladder. And I would have said at that price point that would have been a shared ownership property. So then between 150 and 200,000, there was 1 as well, a 2-bedroom semi-detached at 180,000. Then between 200 and 250, and this is where it all happened this week. So there were 6 sales. That's half of everything that sold, all sitting in that one price range from 210 up to 250,000. A bit of everything in there: terraced, semis, a bungalow, 3s and 4s, your classic family home, and this is week they were kind of going out the door really. And then between 350 and 300,000 there were two, and these two made me smile. Two almost identical 3-bedroom homes over in East Street, one at 284 and one at 285, and they both went on sale, agreed on the very same day. And above 300,000, two more, both bungalows, one at 375 and one at 475. Bungalows are quietly one of the most sought after things we sell around here, and that's your proof. So let's look at this week how it falls. So last week was all top and bottom. This week it's carrying middle. The middle's kind of carrying everything. So that 200 to 250,000 pound range, where most local families are actually moving. But the message for sellers never changes. It's not about whether the market's good or bad. It's about your home being priced right and looking right for what it is and where it is. Get that bit right and there's a buyer waiting, whether you're at 108,000 or 475,000. So if any of that's got you thinking, maybe your own place is worth more than you'd realised, or you just fancy a chat about moving, there's no pressure. Give us a call or come and find us at the little tea room every Friday for our property drop-in sessions. We're there 11:30 until 1:30 every Friday. The drinks and the cake, more importantly, are on us. But if you can't make them, our telephone number is 01733 641030, or head over to our website. So we are available 6 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock daily, and I'll see you next Friday at 7. Take care then.